So can you then, since you mentioned that digestion of protein starts in the stomach, and again, this was a very interesting thing. I was not addressing directly digestive symptoms for my practice. That was not my primary clinical problem people came to me for. And yet when I did intakes of reviewing all their complaints, one of the most frequent complaint I saw on patient surveys was digestive problems. And the paradox was many of them were taking antacids, whether it's a proton pump inhibitor, it's an H2 blocker, and they were the same ones who were talking about digestive problems. A lot of them were the ones who couldn't tolerate protein, couldn't accept protein. So what do you think is going on when someone's on an antacid or an H2 blocker and says they can't digest protein?
Yeah, no, super question. So I'll quickly allude back to what I started, right? When protein falls into your stomach, your protease, which is an enzyme that's designed to break protein down, gets activated. But the trick is it only works in an acidic condition. Now, when you take an antacid, a PPI or an H2 blocker, depending on the type of drug you've taken, your stomach acid production will become 99% less for 2 hours. So you suddenly have a situation where you've essentially turned your stomach off for 2 hours. Now imagine in that same time, you've had protein. So I took my antacid at 10 a.m. I had my protein shake at 11 a.m. Your protein that needed the stomach acid to get digested suddenly finds itself with no stomach acid in the stomach. What do you think is going to happen? It'll either stay there for much longer than it should, or it passes through in an undigested format and then creates trouble downstream in your GI tract.
Exactly.
And so the problem is because you've combined two things that shouldn't have been combined in the first place. It's not a protein issue again. It's you've had an antacid that's made the trouble worse.
Got to. Yeah, and that makes sense, and that corresponds to what I revised in my physiology textbook, right? Is that you're saying things that are valid. And so to be very precise, when you take the antacid or the acid blocker, you haven't stopped the entire stomach. You've stopped the acid secretion part of the stomach.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And this may cause sort of stagnation of food in the stomach for longer, but the motility hormones or the signaling, the neurosignaling, the hormonal signaling of the stomach to move the food ahead in the factory pipeline will still be on. And then you're delivering this neutral pH, non-acidic pH, undigested protein down to your small intestine, which then creates havoc lower down. And so this could be what possibly sets up some people in a vicious cycle of the digestion is just miserable.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, so we can get into more detail here, but there's just a couple of points. In fact, there's one specific that explains a lot of symptoms, right? So why does undigested protein cause gas?
Yes, let's talk about that. Yes.
Here's the biological reason, and then, or rather the physiological reason. When your stomach passes, even if you eat really fast, let's say you don't chew, you'll have large chunks of food in your stomach, but your stomach's job is to sort of mash it into something called chyme, right? It's really viscous liquid that can then be processed downstream. Chyme has an acidity. It's supposed to be acidic in nature. Now, the moment it comes into your small intestine, the small intestine is not an acidic environment. It's not like the stomach. Correct. And so how does that change? It changes because your pancreas starts releasing bicarbonate. But the way the pancreas releases bicarbonate is by sensing the acidity of the chyme, which means the more acidic the chyme, the more bicarbonate is released by the pancreas to neutralize that.
Right.
But the way signaling works is that alongside the parallel pathway alongside bicarbonate is the release of these other enzymes that are needed to break down food.
Right.
Your amylase, for example. And so what happens is, let's say I don't have enough stomach acid or I have a low stomach acid problem. And foods come in, the chyme is not as acidic as it should be. And so the pancreas doesn't need to release as much bicarbonate as it used to before. But that also means it doesn't release as many digestive enzymes as it used to before. And so what happens is low stomach acid doesn't just affect the protein digestion, it affects digestion of most other nutrients, carbs in particular. And when you have all these undigested carbs, they should have been broken down, but they're not. That's when gas starts. Because all of this makes its way to your gut bacteria. Your gut bacteria have a field day. They're fermenting so many more carbs than they should have. and they create gas left, right, and center. So it's not, like I said, it's not the protein that causes the problem. It's a change in your body's sort of signaling across the system. That means anything you eat as well can cause a nuisance in your system.
Right. No, and again, I think this is perfect. I mean, I love the explanation, and hopefully people can follow along. Another point that just strikes me is we always say that, the food we eat is already loaded with bacteria,
Yeah,
right? We touch it, it's been handled, it's been in the environment, and we swallow it. And another purpose of the acid is to also sort of sanitize and destroy bacterial load
yeah,
before it hits the lower intestine, because the lower intestine should not have any bacteria in there. There really
correct.
should not be any bacteria there, right? So that probably brings us to then bacterial overgrowth. What is this word SIBO? Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, where a place that should be bacterially sterile should not have anything going on there. It should be a very quiet, clean digestion of only food. Now you've sent undigested food there and allowing for bacteria to hang out with big chunks of undigested carbs and proteins. And that starts to set up this gas, bloating, feeling like you gained 2 inches, right? That
Yeah,
tightness.
absolutely, absolutely.